When I look back now, it almost feels like another lifetime. The girl I was then so full of trust, so blind in love, so eager to believe that loyalty and sacrifice were enough to keep someone by your side forever. That girl seems like a stranger to me today, but at the time, she was me, and I was her. I was young, working a modest job, living a simple life in a small rented apartment with paint chipping on the walls and a leaky faucet in the kitchen. And yet I thought I had everything I needed because I had Adam, a man who walked into my life with a smile that made my heart skip a beat and words that painted dreams of tomorrow. He didn't come from wealth either. In fact, he was struggling just like me. But together we laughed at our troubles, sharing coffee late into the night at the little cafe down the street and whispering about a future that seemed so close we could almost touch it. We talked about a small house with a white fence, a puppy running around, maybe children who would inherit the love we thought was unshakable, and I believed it all with a faith so blind it almost feels foolish now because I was the one who often paid for dinners. I was the one who encouraged him when he lost a job or when his plans fell through. And though it wasn't easy, I believed in him more than I believed in myself. I told myself that real love was about patience, about weathering storms together. And I never noticed that while I saw storms, he only saw chances to escape the rain. The cracks began subtly, a late reply to a message, a sudden change in his tone when I spoke about responsibilities, a distracted gaze when I talked about our future. I ignored it all because I thought love meant forgiving. Love meant fighting for the person you chose. Until one evening when I needed him most, the illusion shattered. My mother had been admitted to the hospital after collapsing at work, and I remember the panic in my chest as I rushed to the emergency room alone, dialing Adam again and again, my hands trembling, my eyes blurry with tears, but he never answered. I stayed there all night holding my mother's hand, terrified of losing her. And when she finally opened her eyes in the morning, I wanted nothing more than to hear his voice telling me it would be okay. But instead, when I finally got through to him, he answered groggy, irritated, and full of excuses about being too tired and too busy. I told myself it was just a mistake, a bad night. But my heart knew something was wrong, and days later the truth revealed itself. I had gone to surprise him at his apartment with food because I thought maybe he was overworked. Maybe he needed me, only to find him not alone, but with her. She was older, elegant, dripping in wealth and arrogance. The kind of woman who could walk into a room and make people feel small with just one glance. She wore diamonds on her wrist. Her laughter was cold and sharp, and Adam sat beside her like a man who had already forgotten where he came from. My heart dropped. The bag of food slipped from my hands and scattered across the floor, but neither of them seemed to notice. Adam looked up, startled at first, then guilty, and then almost annoyed, as though my presence was the interruption. The woman smirked, amused by my pain, and laid her hand on his arm as if to stake her claim. And in that single moment, every sacrifice I had made for him felt meaningless. Every promise we had whispered to each other dissolved into smoke. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even cry. I just turned and walked away, my legs carrying me blindly through the night until I collapsed on my bed, clutching the empty air where love used to be. For days I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every memory, searching for signs I should have seen. How easily he had traded our dreams for glitter, for luxury, for a life I couldn't give him yet. And it was then in that darkest moment that a truth I had hidden for so long began to burn inside me. Because while Adam thought I was just another ordinary girl he could walk away from, he had no idea who I truly was. I was not the poor, fragile woman he believed me to be. I was the only heir to a billionaire empire. A truth my family had kept quiet for years, so I could live life without pretense or manipulation. I had chosen to be simple. I had chosen to live small, but betrayal has a way of awakening the power inside you. And as I sat alone, broken yet burning, I made a promise to myself. This was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning. The days after Adam's betrayal were some of the darkest of my life. I would wake up each morning with a heavy chest and swollen eyes, haunted by memories that felt more like nightmares. Yet beneath the grief, there was a slow, burning fire. A voice inside me, whispering that I had been too soft for too long, that it was time to rise, not for revenge alone, but to reclaim the dignity and strength I had buried beneath love. So when my father called me into his office a week later and said, "It's time you stepped into the world that has always been waiting for you," I didn't protest this time. My father was a man of immense power, a billionaire whose empire stretched across continents. And though I had never flaunted our wealth, I could no longer pretend that I was just an ordinary woman living an ordinary life. So I moved back into the family mansion, a place I had avoided because it felt like a gilded cage. But this time, I saw it as a fortress, a place where I could rebuild myself stronger. My days became a storm of learning. Boardroom meetings where sharp-eyed executives tested me, business trips where I was forced to speak in front of hundreds, hours of studying finance and strategy, until my head spun. And though at first I stumbled, every misstep fueled my resolve, because each time I felt like giving up, I remembered Adam's mocking eyes and that woman's smug smirk, and I told myself I would never again let anyone make me feel small. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the people who doubted me began to respect me. I wasn't just the daughter of a billionaire anymore. I was proving that I had a mind, a vision, and a backbone strong enough to stand on its own. At charity galas, people whispered about the heiress who returned. At business conferences, reporters began quoting me. My name was appearing in headlines, not as a scandal, but as a rising star in the corporate world. Yet with each victory, I never let myself forget where I had come from. I used my influence to fund scholarships for girls who came from nothing like I once pretended to. I invested in small businesses run by women who had been overlooked because I knew too well what it felt like to be dismissed. But while I was building myself up, the shadow of Adam never really vanished. I heard whispers of him around town. His life with his wealthy mistress wasn't as perfect as he had imagined. The woman who once dazzled him with diamonds grew colder as the months passed. She controlled him with her money, reminded him daily of the life he could never afford without her. And though I never sought news of him, fate has a cruel way of making sure we hear of those who hurt us. One evening at a gala, I walked into the ballroom in a gown that shimmered like liquid gold. And there, across the room, I saw him, Adam. His eyes widening as if he had seen a ghost. He looked thinner, older. And though he tried to smile, there was a hollowness behind it. He had never expected to see me like this. Not the girl in worn-out shoes and cheap dresses, but a woman glowing with confidence, surrounded by power and respect. He tried to approach me, stumbling over his words. "You look incredible. I didn't know—" But I stopped him with a glance colder than ice. I didn't owe him explanations. I didn't owe him pieces of the truth he had thrown away. And so I walked past him as if he were no more than a stranger, but inside me, my heart was pounding, not with longing, but with the bittersweet sting of seeing what could have been if he had only chosen differently. And as the night went on, I realized he had become the man on the sidelines, the one watching while life moved past him. I didn't hate him anymore. In fact, I almost pitied him. But I also knew pity was the last thing he wanted from me, because, to him, pity meant he had lost all power. As the weeks turned into another year, Adam's downfall became clearer. His mistress eventually grew tired of him. Rumors spread that she had found someone younger, richer, more exciting, and Adam was left adrift, jobless, penniless, and abandoned. There were sightings of him at bars, drinking away the nights, whisperings that he tried to find work, but no one respected him. No one wanted him, because his reputation had been stained by his choices. I thought I would feel satisfaction at hearing this. But instead, I felt something different, a sense of closure, a realization that life had already delivered its justice. I didn't need to raise a hand against him, because the man who once thought he had won had already lost more than I could have imagined. Meanwhile, my life soared to heights I never thought possible. I became the face of a new era for my family's empire, a woman stepping into a world once dominated by men, and everywhere I went, people looked at me not as Adam's ex or even as the daughter of a billionaire, but as myself, strong, independent, and unshaken. And yet deep inside me, there was still a space that longed for something real, something beyond power and wealth. I knew one day love would find me again, but this time it would be on my terms, with someone who saw me for who I was, not what I had. Until then I carried on, stronger than ever, knowing that the girl who had once been betrayed was gone forever, replaced by a woman who had discovered her worth, her strength, and her destiny. And I swore to myself that if Adam ever tried to crawl back into my life, he would find not the naive girl who once loved him, but the woman who had outgrown him in every possible way. Months rolled into another year, and as my empire of responsibilities grew, so did my strength. I had transformed from a girl wounded by betrayal into a woman who commanded boardrooms, inspired young women, and carried herself with a confidence so unshakable that people began calling me untouchable. Yet deep down, I knew I was not untouchable. I was simply rebuilt stronger, scarred but wiser, fire forged by pain. And it was that very strength that Adam would come face to face with one last time. For fate, as it often does, orchestrated a reunion neither of us had planned. It was at a charity auction, one of the most glamorous nights of the season, and as I stood on stage announcing a record-breaking donation for children's hospitals, I saw him again at the far end of the hall, not as the confident man I had once known, but as a shadow, dressed in a suit that looked borrowed, his hair slightly unkempt, his face worn with lines of regret. He stood apart from the crowd, like a ghost no one acknowledged, but his eyes never left me, burning with a mixture of shame, longing, and desperation. After the event, he approached me, hesitating as if each step took all the courage he had left. "Please," he whispered when he finally reached me, his voice cracking. "Just hear me out. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I've lost everything. I thought she loved me. I thought the money was security, but she used me and threw me away like garbage, and every night since, I've thought about you, about us, and how I was too blind to see what I had. I don't want your money. I don't want your empire. I just want forgiveness. I just want you." And for a moment, the silence between us felt like the entire world had stopped breathing. I looked at him, this man who once held my heart and crushed it without mercy, and I realized something profound. I no longer felt anger. I no longer felt sorrow. I no longer even felt the heat of revenge. All I felt was clarity, the kind of clarity that comes only when wounds have fully healed. "Adam," I said calmly, my voice steady, "you didn't just betray me. You betrayed yourself. You traded love for greed, trust for vanity, and now you want me to believe you've changed because life punished you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean repeating. I forgive you because I refuse to let your choices chain me anymore. But I will never, ever go back to being that girl who begged for your love. That girl is gone, and the woman standing here has no place for you in her life." His lips trembled as he tried to speak, but no words came. His eyes glistened with tears. He refused to shed, and in that moment, I saw the final truth. He wasn't just sorry because he had lost me. He was sorry because I had outgrown him so completely that he no longer had a place in my world. I turned away, walking into the night surrounded by my security and my colleagues. But more than that, surrounded by my own strength, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Yet life, as I was learning, had more to give than closure, for while Adam drifted further into obscurity, I met someone unexpected, a man who didn't flinch at my wealth, who didn't see my family name as a prize, but instead challenged me, respected me, and cared for me in ways that had nothing to do with money or power. He was a philanthropist who had built schools in struggling communities, a man with his own scars, and slowly, carefully, love bloomed again. Not the naive love of my youth, but a deeper, truer connection built on mutual respect and resilience. And as my life expanded into this new chapter, Adam's story dwindled into whispers. I heard he had left the city. Some said he lived in a shabby apartment. Others said he worked odd jobs, just to get by. And though a part of me once might have wanted to gloat, I didn't. Instead, I prayed he would one day find peace in his own way. For while he had lost me, perhaps life would still offer him a chance to rebuild himself. But our paths were no longer meant to cross. My path was blazing forward, bright and unrelenting, and one evening, standing on a balcony overlooking the skyline that glittered like a sea of stars, I realized that my story was no longer about betrayal or revenge or even wealth. It was about transformation, about how a broken heart could become the seed of an empire of strength, how pain could carve a woman into someone unshakable. I had become not just the heiress to my father's billions, but the heir to my own destiny, a destiny I had taken into my own hands. And as the wind lifted my hair and I thought about the girl I used to be, I smiled softly, grateful to her for surviving, grateful to Adam for showing me what I deserved not to accept, and grateful, too, the universe for reminding me that sometimes the greatest heartbreaks are the very doors to the greatest triumphs. And with that thought, I closed the chapter on my past for good, stepping into the radiant, boundless future that was waiting for me, knowing in every corner of my soul that I had not just survived, I had risen, and I would keep rising forever.